Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Verit Kogan, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Lynn Balter. From a young age, Lynn began learning the lessons that would bring her closer to her true self, a journey of self-discovery, surviving childhood trauma, sexual assault, breast cancer, addiction, divorce, her son's diagnosis of autism, caring for loved ones who had traumatic brain surgery, multiple myeloma, having near fatal accidents, and so on. All of these experiences, she believes, perfectly intended for her growth, a growth that would continue to align her personality to her soul, what she calls her true self. After attending Western Michigan University and earning her business administration degree, Lynn moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, where she began her career as a property manager and then a real estate broker, and ultimately becoming a highly successful entrepreneur in the vacation rental industry. Lynn has helped raise millions of dollars for Autism Speaks and the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center. She is the author of the book, Walking Through Pain to Purpose. And that is what we're going to be focusing on in today's conversation, because I sense that many of you listening or watching this are experiencing some form of pain or have experienced some form of pain or crisis in your life. And it is my belief as well that that is helping you in your own journey of growth and learning and conscious evolution. And so, Lynn, it is just such a real treat to have you here today and for you to share the stories that you've experienced, because I believe that we can all learn from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Verit, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a joy. So I mentioned kind of a moment ago this kind of concept of, crisis. And my belief is that crisis ignites evolution. So when we experience a personal crisis, that is there to teach us some lessons so that we could evolve, reach a higher level of consciousness. And that is true in the collective as well. We're all going through some collective crises now in our planet that are there should we choose to shift some of our belief systems, maybe release old attachments that will lead us, ignite us toward an evolution and hopefully a conscious revolution, if you will, in our planet. So share with me a little bit what shows up for you when I say the words crisis ignites evolution as you reflect on your own life and the crises, some of which we heard about that you've experienced.
Well, I think the purpose of life is really expansion. And as we're growing and learning, things come up for all of us where we have challenges and crises that occur. And it's my belief system that those challenges come up for us to help us learn certain lessons that we need to learn as individuals. And for me, those lessons kept coming up from an early age in childhood throughout my life. And each time the lessons got a little harder sometimes to sort of get my attention. And I learned through going through each one of these challenges that the only way I was going to begin to heal from them or to understand them was to seek more information and receive more knowledge. And as I got even older, that meditation was one of those forms to do that as well. But each time something came up, it was certainly a lesson that I needed to receive in order to grow.
Thank you. And share with us one of those situations that you are now kind of looking back very clear about what that lesson was that you were meant to learn from the experience and how that helped you to essentially transform.
Well, one of them was, first of all, my mother. So I had a mother that had a lot of challenges of her own, and it was very difficult for her to raise. She had 6 children. And I was the oldest of 6. So I learned very early on that my role in life was to care for her and her responsibilities within the family. So I learned early on that my needs were secondary to the needs of what she needed to make sure she was happy and calm. So that started my role in being a victim and serving at my own expense, and then playing the martyr role, which would often occur throughout my life as well. So that was one of the early on lessons. And as I grew to learn and to seek, there was the anger towards my mother dissipated as I realized how I was intended to have my perfect mother for me to help me learn and grow from the roles that I was playing that were so unhealthy for me that continued through my life.
So again, I think that some of us, hearing this or reflecting back maybe on our own childhood and maybe some of the things that we may have picked up, certain beliefs about our role in the world. So, what do you think it's important for people to know around the work, right? Of like going back and really gaining that knowledge of what perhaps was the empowering lessons that we're meant to receive from our life's experiences.
Well, I think what I learned early on, and I had this natural urge to seek as a child. I just naturally wanted to learn what made us behave the way we did. So, starting at 14 years old, I found a therapist at 14 that was paid for by the state in Michigan. And I started going to therapy on my own. And I, believe it or not, back in those days, I hitchhiked to my therapy. So I actually then from there got my mother into therapy. I got my father into therapy. He even would see some of my brothers and sisters. So he was my first real mentor that made me realize that things, could shift and you could grow from these experiences. But throughout my life, those taps kept getting harder. And even the experiences as big as me being assaulted, I was sexually assaulted when I was 25. A man broke into my home when I was sleeping and kidnapped me and assaulted me. And so even that experience, I found through it that I was a victim and I was playing the role as a victim. And for many years after that, I used to speak to groups of women about how to hold your head up high and walk proud, because a lot of people who are out there, predators that are out there, are looking for the meeker people that have that victim stance about them. And I learned that in studying how predators sort of act. And this particular person had stalked me for many months and knew so many things about me. So I would teach other women how to be firm and strong and assertive in how they walked and how they behaved. And so that was, to me once again learning that I portrayed that victim role. Not saying it was my fault, but it was just another lesson for me to realize that I had to heal that part of me. And those lessons as a victim kept coming over and over again in my relationships with other people, my continued relationship with my mother, and my responsibilities with the family. I took over guardianship of my special needs brother many years ago, so it's been a challenge there as well. And so I realized that, and I started seeing teachers and speakers and conferences anywhere I could get them to get more information. And I talk about a lot of my teachers in my book, and I quote many of my teachers. But I think in order to change our mind or a way that we manage our lives, learning and more information can help us change our minds so we change behavior. And so I learned through one doctor called Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I have a lot of respect for. And he would teach me, and all of us how, and I go to many conferences with Bruce. In fact, I know him now. And literally he would teach 95% of our personalities are unconscious and only 5% we're really aware of. And he thinks by the age you're 7 that begins, because we're literally programmed, and some of that programming is healthy for us and some of it isn't healthy for us. And for us to learn how to unprogram that, like methods like yourself that you have read with your mind, with your mindset game, that is what helps us learn to grow, to shift, to change. And for me, it's not only been information to change that 95% I'm unconscious of. And Joe Dispenza, who I just love him, and I do his meditations every day. But he thinks from the time you're 35, it's like almost uncrackable, right? Like you are so, engaged in these behaviors and these patterns that you've been programmed to believe are true. So in order to change that 5%, I work really hard at it. And so I wrote my book because, and I believe me, I screw up all the time still. It's like I'm constantly reeling myself back in and going back to those old patterns. But the change now in me is that I'm observing it now. When I do those behaviors and I fall back into those victim roles, and many of my stories through my book just show you how the victim role came over and over and over. I just wasn't getting it. It was like, a brick we had to go through the window. So today, I seek out people like Dr. Bruce Lipton for that information. And I have to tell you, is it okay if I just tell a story that I just heard that Dr. Limpton had said to make this point so clear?
Of course.
So he just had this YouTube on that was just amazing about how he was in Tel Aviv recently, and he had a bunch of the audience was like 1,300 people. So he had the Palestinians there. That he had bussed in like 300 people from Palestine, from the West Banks to Tel Aviv, and then the rest of the people in the audience were Israelis. And so he showed them pictures of little boys when they teach them their children, because we're formed by seven primarily, of the little boys having guns and military outfits and separating them from the Palestinians and the Israelis. And he showed them and showed their faces and the ahas going up of how these children were pre-programmed to hate and how much violence is created in our world because we're pre-programmed. So it happens within our own governments, within our own political system, and within our own families, because our families are doing unconscious patterns that they weren't aware of as well. So to shift those belief systems, it's something that you have to remind yourself of every day when you're doing the work.
Yeah. And of course, there are techniques that can help us to release these core beliefs at an unconscious level very, very quickly.
Yes.
So I think the important thing is to realize here that when we have experiences in our life, and they're unpleasant experiences, things that we may not necessarily welcome or desire, is to get curious, to consider, what if this event might be here on my path for a reason and a purpose? Maybe there is something that I'm meant to become conscious of. Maybe some parts of me that are operating out of patterns that are no longer true or relevant or adaptive, in alignment with my current goals or intentions, that it is time to shift. And just that questioning, the pausing to say, what if this is here to ignite some form of growth or transformation for me? That, for many people, can at least invite an opportunity to go inward and to ask the questions like, what am I meant to learn here? Perhaps what is it time for me to let go of, or what's most important here? And when we do that, when we're able to go inward and just with curiosity and compassion to ask those questions, there are parts of us that may share the answer, that may tell us why this event has come up for us. And that's really transformative. I'll share with you a quick example. So the mom of a neighbor of mine has a speaking engagement that is coming up. And she is very nervous to speak in public. Just even her sharing it with me this morning, she was getting sick and she needed to sit down, And so we just did a little bit of work and we connected with an event that happened in high school with a friend that said something, and an earlier event in elementary school with her mom and something that had happened that led her to believe that there is something wrong with her. That was the decision that was made. There is something wrong with me from those experiences. And in going inward and connecting with those parts and soothing and loving those parts, she was able to receive the truth. We were able to do a belief change process to change the belief to she is worthy and lovable exactly as she is, that she is perfect as she is. And it was really, really transformative for her, because for the first time she could see the gift that that child that made that comment when she was in high school, and her mother that made the hurtful comment when she was in elementary school, was really there to now, 62 plus years later, give her this lesson. And she realized, I am good. I am good. There's nothing wrong with me. I am good. And then when we project it into this speaking opportunity that she has coming up with 200 people, all of the nervousness just melted away. There was no nervousness. It was just excitement. She's ready. She knows there's nothing to be nervous about. And that needed to, and that experience happened because she was able to go inward. So yes, we could have worked on speaking skills and all of this kinds of stuff. But really what's happening is that there were parts of her that was just really afraid of her getting hurt again. And so those parts of her were trying to essentially protect her, shelter her from experiencing that kind of shame or embarrassment again. And so I think that the work that you speak of is that you've done and all the things that you've learned are important for people to realize that when there are events in our life that we are feeling unpleasant emotions about, whether it's as we think about in the past or as we project in the future or even in the moment, that means there's something on the inside that may need some healing. And the only way to do that is by doing the work that you spoke about, by becoming conscious of the unconscious, saying, what is this here to teach me? Right?
Correct. And it's like the people that trigger me in my life, it's always because there's something not healed within myself. So when people are hurting, they react, right? And it's not personal. So they're reacting because there's still a pain left in them. So it's never personal to us. So it's really important to remind ourselves of that and to know when we are triggered, because I still get triggered, and to remind ourselves that's still something I need to work on then, or that wouldn't be affecting me in that manner. So it's a reminder to us when we're feeling unsettled. And I think when we remind each other that doing this inner work, like literally meditation, when you practice it, as a habit, it literally makes you feel high. And you literally go in and there's such warmth and it's so cozy in there and it's so full of just love and wonder. And you have to wake up and start working on your stuff again as soon as you wake up. So I just my intention of writing my book is to open up those doors for more of us to just know healing is possible, and healing is a journey that continues. You're never done. You're never done, expanding and growing and learning. And I think the more and more of us that have these conversations like we're having now, that more and more people will wake up to everything being inside. It's so wonderful in there. No one in the world should have the power to make us unbalanced within ourselves. And I still let it happen sometimes. And I say to myself, that's on me. That's on me. Because we should all be happy. The whole reason we're here is just to be happy and look at this beautiful world we live in, and the experiences we have to offer each other. So I just think having these conversations, it encourages more and more people to kind of go in there and understand that they have control to find that happiness. And with all the chaos going on in our world today, just the more and more people that know how wonderful it is in there, we're not going to have as much chaos out there, in my opinion. So I just love having these conversations.
So I'm curious, as a parent, Lynn, whose son got a diagnosis of autism, and I imagine there were many emotions when you first heard that. How did you manage that and then be able to turn it around such that you are in such service to other families and children that are going through this?
Well, I think I did the same thing that I always did. At first, I was, just devastated, and I was a victim. Poor me, the victim role, the normal triggers were there. And it took me a long time to sort of get through all that denial and all that anger, go through the whole 5 stages of grief. So once you get through those stages and you get to the acceptance, the last stage, that's when it all starts to shift. And then you start to realize, I better get busy and learn and offer all the services to my child that he needs to grow and to expand in his own life. So every single time I've had a tragedy happen to me, I've always felt like I've turned something really bad into something good within me when I can help someone else. Because people with autism, when the families are diagnosed with autism, because I say families are diagnosed, not just the individual, the whole family's being affected. And literally they need to talk to other families that understand it, that have been through it. They don't want to talk to someone who doesn't understand autism. And it's the same thing with what people with sexual assault. They want to talk to someone who's been assaulted. You want to talk to someone who's been through your kind of cancer, maybe to the level of your kind of cancer. So it comforts people to have someone who's been through a crisis offer assistance to them and comfort and empathy. So for me, it's healed me by reaching out and helping and giving back. And some of my friends, when I talk to them when they get diagnosed, I never ever, you listen, you see where they're at. So you offer them information that they're ready for, because you can't bombard them all at once with all this information. So you just sort of feel out where they're at. And it's the same thing with anyone in my life. When I don't like to give out information unless people ask me, you know what I mean, to pretend that I know what they need, right? So everybody's in different stages of how they manage their lives when they're given a diagnosis such as autism or cancer or sort of really serious traumatic things.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that, because I think that the idea here is that when we are experiencing these unpleasant experiences or crises in our life, to find community, to learn from others, what can help to get a sense of hope from others. And that's true even in business. So when companies are going through change and chaos and uncertainty, to reach out to others, other individuals, other leaders that may have experienced something similar, that can give them, again, some guidance, some inspiration, at the very least, hope of what is possible for them, once they, of course, accept the change, and can move toward helping their company to thrive through the experience, right? To get more resources, maybe have a culture that's more change ready and more resilient, and so on. So, the other thing that, as I kind of read your story, that came to mind is, um, you've gone through so many of these experiences, and you even said yourself at some point, it's like, it was the victim thing again and again and again. It's like you noticed a pattern that was, coming up. And every time you still did the work, and then that pattern would show up again. So if somebody's wondering, well, I've done the work, I've whether it's talked to a therapist or a coach, or I've done my own inner work, I've gotten some learnings, and it keeps showing up. What advice do you have for them, that can help them to stay the course and to continue to do the work?
Well, first of all, it's be easy on yourself, because I think, like that 95% that's ingrained in us from such a small age. And I mean, it's just so unconscious. So it's so hard to recognize our own behavior. They say that we can see 100% of someone else that we're observing, but we can only see 5% of us. So that's a problem. so, so I am constantly having to reel myself back in from old patterns and the people pleasing and the martyring and the constant, right? So the difference becomes the more inner work you do. And if you do your meditations every day and programs like yours, Vered, and if you really keep that focus, because it's just natural human tendency to forget, right? You just forget. So you just always have to know you're going to have to do the work, right? And that kind of work is so freeing because it makes us happy. Once we do this kind of work, we can be more forgiving, we can be happier, we can be just, a more abundant, in so many different ways. So, and I think the one thing we can offer this world today, with all of the division that we see outside of us, is we can show by our example that we're doing our best, to try to grow within, because it's so good in there. We all have that inside. It's only the outside stuff that gets us a little riled up. So for me, it's like forgiving myself every time I do it, because I do. And then going into that meditation the very next day and loving, I feel like I'm on this high that's so amazing. Like, people want to get high off other stuff. You don't need it. You can just do the meditation. When you hear about people doing, what do you call it? Ayahuasca. How do you say that?
Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca. And so someone told me, if people do ayahuasca, that's fine, but it's like sort of like a brick wall trying to get through spiritually awakening. And if you meditate, it's sort of like just making a window. You know what I mean? Where you just open this little window and you just start looking out that window, and it's pretty wonderful. So, and being forgiving of ourselves. I think we have to be really good to ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that grace, the self-compassion is so important, because when we give ourselves the forgiveness, the grace, the compassion, realizing that in the moment when we did the thing that we did the best that we could, right? Even if it's in the sense of we couldn't in the moment fight off a predator or somebody that hurt us, we did the best that we could in that moment with the resources that we had available in the state that we were in. So, we can learn from that and take better care of ourselves in the future, or take care of others, and to have just a whole lot of, acceptance of who we are and that we're always doing our best. The other thing that I wanted to ask you is, you know, uh, this concept of like the path to meaning and purpose, right? That these crises are there to help us to gain clarity on what that is, because a lot of people these days are struggling with, what am I meant to do? What is my purpose? And they see, they look for that, in different places. And so just from your own experience, because I know that you do a lot for different organizations. I mean, from what I've seen and read, I mean, you give of your time, of your energy to support many people, many families in all kinds of different ways. So I imagine that there's a great deal of reward and meaning and purpose in that for you. So yeah. So what guidance do you have for others as to how to find their path of meaning and purpose?
Well, someone told me once, and I always remember this, that like we're kind of like the airplane, and our souls are kind of like the pilot, and the control center is sort of like our guides, right? And so like when I'm meditating, I'm literally going in and asking for guidance, right? And so I just get excited when something good comes up that I'm supposed to do, right? It just shows up. I don't even ask for it to show up. It just shows up. And so even when I started writing my book, I just found such joy in it. I mean, like sometimes I would just like read what I wrote the next day, and I swear to God, I did not write it. It just sort of came right through me. And so I just think when you're doing something you love, you just feel good. And I think our purpose of life also is just to feel good. So I think when we go through a hard time and we turn that around and we help someone else going through a similar situation, to me, even though it's hard and it's hard circumstances, it makes me feel good that I can be of assistance, in any form I can be.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it is very, very empowering to be able to utilize what we've learned in support of others, right? To expand that love, right? So if we got a gift, a learning, a mindset shift, to support others, if they're ready, right? To experience a similar transformation for themselves, or at least to show them that it's possible through our own experience. So, what do you really want people to walk away with from our conversation today? What's most important, do you believe?
Mostly that it's all within us, like it's all inside. And so if we get the tools through learning, and then we just seek within ourselves, it's like, they say the kingdom of, not they, but the kingdom of heaven is within, right? It really is. And it just takes away so much fear. And I just wanted to share my story so people can see the joy that comes from that. And hopefully they'll, just look at my little experience as maybe something, to inspire them, maybe if they're struggling in a certain area, but also to know that when we're going through hard times, to be kind to ourselves, just to be kind to ourselves, and to put how we feel more important than maybe what's happening in front of us.
Mm.
And it's really hard to do, but it's a skill worth learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we're managing our emotions, we're vibrating at that higher level. We're able to be more coherent, to think more clearly, and to access our heart's guidance. So that kingdom within, the control center, if you will, of guidance, that comes when we're in a coherent state, when we're in a state of love, essentially. We're able to receive that. And it certainly does help us to make those quantum leaps, if you will, in our evolution, that the crisis is there to move us toward, right? Toward those learnings and resources. And so I'm so grateful to you, Lynn, for coming on our show today and sharing some of your experiences. Again, it was, I see this conversation as really just a sweet example of what's possible when people are willing to do the work when they are experiencing hardships in their life. And the sweetness and the joy, as you said, we're meant to feel good. That can come when we do that because we all deserve to feel good, to have that mental, emotional freedom, that sense of liberation from our conditionings and programs and life events. And that's available to every single listener and viewer today. So thank you again. How can people learn more about you, the book, and so on?
Well, first of all, thank you, Verette. I really am grateful to be on your podcast. It's awesome. And you can find me on lynnbalter.com. And my book is Walking Through Pain to Purpose.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Lynn.
Thank you. Take good care, Verette.